it's a very good afternoon to the Sportzfan Radio panel on a lovely spring day. Not that you'd know it after a couple of days ago where we had power outages. Judge, a topic that you've been very interested in and that you and I have been discussing offline is to the question, to knee or not to knee? That is the question. What are your thoughts on it?
Professor, we've spoken about this some time ago when it became popular, and I said at the time, this has got mud written all over it, forcing people to do something they may not want to do, irrespective of how worthy the cause is. And nobody can be against the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course we're not. But I'm against anybody being forced to do something, and forcing someone to take the knee, I thought had mud written all over it. And I think we're starting to see that, most obviously with the De Kock situation, but I've noticed other sports where people are reluctant or unwilling to take the knee for a whole host of reasons, including religious reasons, by the way. Some people think that genuflecting is something they'll do to their God, but they won't do to a cause. And I actually think, Professor, it's getting to the stage where players are being bullied into taking it. In fact, I'll say it now, they are being bullied. I see Holding is getting stuck in, Michael Holding is getting stuck into Quinton De Kock, virtually saying, you must take that knee. If you don't take that knee, that indicates you are not supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think is just a lot of nonsense. So that's my take on it, and I think it'll continue to become an issue. And if the issue is people taking or not taking the knee, I think it's really taking away from the sincerity of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I say get rid of it.
And I know, Judge, what you'll agree with me on here is that he was presumed guilty immediately. He's almost the head of the Ku Klux Klan, just simply because not taking the knee. Yeah. Yet he had his own reasons for not doing so. They're not racist at all. But people just leap to that presumption that that's the reason behind it. People have many reasons why they don't.
Well, one of the things was that they were told this on the bus on the way to the ground 2 hours before. Oh, by the way, you'll be all taking the knee, won't you? And he said, oh, hang on. We haven't been told about this. This tool's been around for a while, and I wasn't told about it. He's coming on board now, but don't you get the impression Paul is coming on board because he's being bullied into it?
Well, Andrew Simons left the Australian cricket team because he was asked to have a protein shake at 8 a.m. on a Sunday, I think, and he said, I'm not up for these new rules and I just want to play it the way I play it. But there are some serious issues behind it. I don't like authoritarianism either, but...
Yeah, well, it's like a competition of wokeism. Like on the one hand, my woke thing is that I'm against racism, so that's my position. And De Kock can say, well, my woke thing is that I believe in individual choice. Who can disagree with that? But it looks like my wokeism beats your wokeism. Therefore, you must obey what we're doing. Otherwise, social media will gobble you up and spit you out.
And have a look at his team. It's not like he's got a team that looks like the Aryan race, where everyone's blonde and blue eyes. He's doing the ultimate for racial integration. He's doing the ultimate for multiculturalism. He's got a team of superstars that appear united. So it's not as if there's any racism in the team.
Well, South Africa's a perfect example, Paul, because I think you remember the apartheid days, and that was just bloody horrible. Well, that wasn't resolved by people sitting around or standing around taking a knee or standing a circle without their shoes on or whatever it is the latest protest du jour. There was a genuine movement where good people realised that apartheid won't be stood for, and they got rid of it. But doing little tricks was what I'd call it, just standing around putting a knee down. I don't think that's going to achieve anything other than to have this anti-movement step up. What do you reckon, Coutta?
De Kock is the captain of the South African team. My understanding is that it's a mixed family, so his mother's black. So wouldn't you think that of all people, he would have a greater understanding of this? And the fact that he wasn't going to do it and then doesn't play. And he said, it's not about me. And he said he can't believe that this has been made about him. I don't know, like, what do we think when we watch the AFL take a kneel when they do the huddle in the centre of the circle when it's in the Sir Doug Nicholls round? It's about education. I think it's like any theme round. You do it for 1 week and then do you forget it for the rest of the season? Like, are you okay day? Like, okay, great to celebrate a day, but then what about the rest of the 364 days? Like,
that's the thing. Like, a yellow screensaver is not going to help me out if I'm not one day a year. You know?
yeah, and I just think that, like, the World Cup, the T20 World Cup for us as a nation, like, I don't think it's ranking that highly, to be honest.
Neither are our stats.
Oh, we're a terrible T20 nation. In the men's side, the women's side, they're absolute superstars. But it shouldn't be overpowered. It shouldn't be dominating the cricket, but it is. So for me, do I really like? It's just one of those things that just keeps happening. Judge, like, we're always discussing it.
Peter, when I see it, what I think is when I see, say, 20 players take the knee, I'm thinking, there's about probably 5 racists here taking the knee. So it's the racists who will not stand out. They'll take the knee, but does that change them? Not one iota. I think it's actually tokenism. And so far as the AFL, they love tokenism. They'll have a Anzac Day. They'll have a Pride round. They'll have Indigenous round. But as you say, it'll be like a Chinese meal. It fills you up for a few hours, and then you've got to need another one. You've got to need another protest movement a week later. Well, they don't worry about that. They forget about it. They say, well, job done. We've ticked off that box. We proved we're not racially intolerant. We proved we're not homophobic, and let's get on with it. And I just
very different situation. John Gruden, the coach of the Raiders in the NFL, was sacked for racism. I thought that was very brave, given they're about average height of about 6'6" and 120 kilograms and 80% black. If there's one sport you don't want to be a racist in, he picked the wrong one, Johnny Gruden. But that's a very different story to this one here.
And why should sport solve racism? If we've got a team, for instance, South Africa, you've got a captain who's of a mixed race family, why should they be leading the social charge? It seems to me that Twitter and all the rest of the thing, it's good, it's been done. Racism is being solved. It's not being solved at all, and I think it gives a false positive as to what's actually being achieved.
Is sport not seen as being so important, and the messaging of our athletes that are our idols and that we look up to, and it's something that has been all the way through. Like, I'm 46 years of age, and we've had athletes promote certain causes and the like, and that will continue to happen. So,
no question it happens.
John, I understand what you're saying, but that will continue to happen. And like, are they championing a cause? Yeah, they are. And our politicians probably aren't doing it. So they're doing other things that I don't know, but having photos on planes and going to seminars and all sorts of stuff. But our athletes, they continue to do it. They continue to take a stand. I know we're going to talk about it, but the young boy from Adelaide United this week, who's like, that is groundbreaking for us. And I'm absolutely blown away by the way that he did the announcement. If people haven't seen it, watch him do it, and it is truly inspiring. And that, John, is not political. That's nothing. That is just pure raw emotion of a young kid that's now being honest to himself.
And that, can I say, proves the argument. When you do it genuinely from the heart, you actually mean it. That clearly means something. But what I'm saying is, when you're pressured to do it / forced to do it, bullied to do it, I think that sends the wrong message, and that's the way it's being done. I am absolutely in favour of individuals standing up for what they believe in, if they genuinely believe it. But as I say, of those knee-taking circles, there'll be some racists in there who are taking the knee just because that's what they're told to do, and but they don't necessarily believe it. But no, that kid will come to it. He's a star.
Sorry, I just wanted to adopt Gelding's hand-up technique in his absence. But no, definitely, I'm reading the news about De Kock and his sort of stance and everything. The first thing that came to mind was the opposite sort of backlash happened when Colin Kaepernick was the only one to take the knee, and how quickly the atmosphere in terms of what this symbol means, it seems like it's gone from meaning something really powerful, and it's now put Kaepernick in his career in this whole other level, to where it's swapped, where it's something that you have to do and is expected of you. And it kind of comes to that point now where I feel like the motion itself, it has that same, the meaning still there, but it's become overused, especially as you were saying before, Judge. There's no doubt that there are racists that are out there taking the knee just to blend in and do what they think needs to be done. And as you were saying before, Coots, it's now that these athletes have a massive platform and everyone looks up to them and they expect everything from them, but they're not qualified to do this as well. It's the same way that there's a lot of athletes that love getting in front of a camera and talking about a game, but they've played the game. They're not qualified journalists to actually tell you about what's going on. I have no doubt that there are athletes out there who are qualified and are ready to do this, but if you're going to look to them, you can't automatically look to every other athlete and expect them to have an expert opinion on whatever's going on at the time. It's impossible for anyone to do, let alone someone who is constantly focusing on their athletic career.
I'll tell you who did take a knee overnight in America, Jordan De Goey in handcuffs. That's another story.
Allegedly.
Coutta, you sucked breath in there. Did you have a comment?
No, I was just saying exactly what Sarah said then. That, like, seriously, that we've got people commenting, and it's not just on this, it's on everything, that shouldn't be commentating. Like it just amazes me. It's like Rita, what's her name? I think she's overseas, and she should be staying overseas as an example. Our borders really need to be stronger than what they are, and if she doesn't feature on a series of Border Patrol, I'll be very disappointed.
It's an interesting point you make, Judge, because and Sarah pointed to Colin Kaepernick, but Kaepernick is known for taking the knee, but the first time he didn't take a knee. His first level of protest was to sit during the national anthem. He didn't stand like all the others, he sat down. And that created such a furor that the next time he did it, he took a knee, which was, although it created a furor, it wasn't as bad as sitting down during the national anthem. So, yes, take a knee is a sign of Black Lives Matter, but it didn't start there. And all of these things tend to get forgotten when we hone in on just one little act. And I think the rest is just forgotten. And if we don't remember the whole of it, how do we learn from it?
Well, Professor, you're old enough to remember the Smith and Carlos at the Olympics, the Black Power salute supported by Peter Norman. And that is about the most powerful sporting protest I can imagine, can remember, or ever seen. But that was totally spontaneous by three people, and I think that meant a lot, and I think that achieved a lot. But if it became de rigueur that every time an athlete ran in a race they had to put their fist up, I'm telling you, it'll lose its effect. And I think we have to have brave people take brave stances individually to overcome their, what's happened to them. That means something to the punters. But when it's just choreographed, in the way that it is, I think it loses effect.
Well, you're right, Judge, because the South African cricketers and the Indian cricketers were both told that that's what they had to do. Now, I don't know how you tell a player, well, you've got to do that, and what basis you're making that demand. compare that with the Olympics. The IOC, when this came up prior to Japan, said you will not take a knee.
Yep.
They buckled in the end and said that it was okay to take a knee, but their first point of reference was, no, you can't do it.
And that's also because as part of the Olympic Charter, you cannot take a protest of any sort.
Yes.
If you are, you'll be straight away removed. So the Olympics, I see this whole movement as being almost a sort of type of fascism where you're being told exactly how you'll behave. Well, that's what fascism is about. Well, the Olympics are the world leaders of it. I mean, they dictate every single aspect of the sport, and that's why that Carlos Smith Norman protest just resonates now. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Judge. Well, we do say we're the thinking person sports show, and it's not often that on a sports show you're discussing fascism, but we do. So well done for that, Judge. Our second topic for the day, Paul, off-field, out-of-season incidents. You mentioned one already with the AFL. The NRL haven't been devoid of those either, with the NRL being very busy handing out breach notices to Nathan Cleary, Stephen Crichton and Tyrone May, and fines for misbehaviour. What are your thoughts on that?
Tyrone May is a serial offender. Just spare a thought for the NRL Premiership Trophy. That's been battered around, and even two of the figures on it have just fallen off it, and they were walking around carrying it like it was a baby. Two of the immortals, one of whom recently passed away. So you can imagine how most rugby league fans and traditionalists, purists like myself, felt about some lunatic carrying that round a dance floor like it's a baby in a sling, part of the trophy. So I think the high point of the Demons celebrations was Max Gawn on someone's shoulders. They must have been pretty strong, whoever that was, but there was none of that sort of disrespect shown. There are a lot of fans out there who cannot wait for their team to take on Penrith next year. Everyone's entitled to celebrate a premiership win, but these Panthers have just gone overboard, and it's just disrespectful, I think. The extent of the celebrations. You've won, great, but respect the game and know that you're back into it next year, and you're going to be the hunted. The Panther will become the hunted. I can tell you, they'll be more nervous than a rhino with Glenn McGrath with a rifle watching across the scope. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how they go next year, because they will be the number one target for everyone to attack.
There's no excuse for what they did. And we've talked about Tyrone May before and his behaviour and actions and the like. But this excuse that they've had a long season and they let their hair down just doesn't work.
There's no hair left to let down. They've just been at it for months. A month, I think. But
that's no excuse anymore. There should be no excuse anyway. And obviously there's an incident in America at the moment that will be talked about at nauseam all week. But yeah, I just social media is obviously one thing that's entered the equation that sort of captures everything everyone does, and you're on show the whole time. I think Melbourne Demons put the phones away after some of the celebrations. I think day 2, it was at the Cottesloe. I think there was just something that someone said, put the phones away, no social media for the rest of the day. But yeah, I just the Penrith stuff was just childish, and really when you've got a club legend coming out and saying that you've gone too far, I think you've really let yourselves down. You let your club down. I think you've also let the competition down. So, and the other thing, obviously, Paul, was on back of the Melbourne Storm as well. So, you would think. Well, sorry, I shouldn't use the word "think" when we talk about NRL, but that those players, you would think, on the back of what the Storm players have done, would have been a little bit more smarter and go, well, let's just pull our heads in and celebrate it in the right manner. And unfortunately, they've broken the trophy, got fines for that. Tyrone May's done his tweet. Some of the social media stuff was just ridiculous. So what do you think they'll ever learn, Paul?
Well, you make a good point. I remember many years ago, I lived in London and seeing on the front page of the paper, not one of the more esteemed papers, but if you've got a photo of someone doing something out of order, send it in and we'll pay you. We're not far off that now, where if someone sees someone carrying on, but I've got to compare it, I mean, just for a bit of nostalgia reasons, when the Canberra Raiders won, I think it was back in about 1990, they'd been drinking for days and they had the trophy in the ute, and I think two of the boys fell out of the ute with the trophy. Now, the trophy didn't survive. That's very different to this carry on with the Panthers. I mean, that was back in an era. It was a parade that was being filmed, and of course they're going to be on show. But I'm not forgiving that, days of drinking and you've dropped the trophy. But that's an accident. This is just reckless disregard for the traditions of the game. And these players. I mean, that video with the Storm. I still don't know who leaked that. I mean, a conspiracy theorist would say it's been leaked to cut about $500,000 off each of their salaries because they're both off contract, which makes it even more astounding. They'd be dancing, holding bags of whatever it was. Maybe it was the Nadia Bartel stuff, but I still don't think they know what it was. But it was a very bad look. And if for players who are out of contract, it's astounding. I mean, that Brandon Smith professor could be headed to your club. What sort of influence? He seemed to be quite proficient at what he was doing on the table there. What sort of influence you want at your club, Professor, is another question. And whether someone like a Phil Gould, who runs the Dogs now, would stand for that sort of behaviour. You've got to hope that he can pull his head in if he's going to be on $1 million a year at the Dogs, which is very strong mail of happening.
Wow. And I think it does create this larger thing about the whole social media environment that we're currently living in. Like, as you said, advertising for people to send stuff through. There's video just emerged of Jordan Goey dancing at the New York nightclub. Like, really? And then, of course, Sarah, we can talk about the AFLW and Taylor Harris, the kicking style of Taylor, and that just was vile. So I think at the end of the day, the behaviour, one, isn't condoned, but then all the other stuff that goes with it is just, I think, just appalling as well.
The problem is, though, of course, that the players, and this is no defence in any way, I do have some sympathy for the fact that these players are under more pressure than ever, but that doesn't justify cutting loose to the extent they do. But this is largely a sport driven with testosterone, and you have these players that they're not just going to go home and have a chamomile and a glass of Shiraz and tuck themselves into bed, unfortunately. So you are going to get some idiots, the same way you do get some idiots amongst the general population, which Judge can surely confirm. It's just, I mean, the swimmers are famous for this, is that they taper themselves in the lead up to an event, and just very quickly they'll have the same amount of calorie intake for 2 or 3 days leading into their event, but not do any physical exercise. So when they hit the pool, they're absolutely ready to roar. Now, when they enter the athletes' village, they're not sitting down for a green tea, the swimmers. So it is tough, because if there's one profession and one type of individual who's likely to get into trouble for going to excess, apart from rock stars, you'd have to put it down to sportsmen. And rugby league is such a physical game. I can understand why they cut a bit loose afterwards, but this Panthers stuff, again, is all captured. Most of it is. And I think that was very smart, packing the phones away at the Demons. I wonder who came up with that idea, because not to suggest that bad behaviour is being covered up, but people just don't need to see it, and it doesn't help anyone. You've just got to make sure you don't go too nuts, but you don't want it filmed because it's the worst possible look, literally.
Well, can I throw a theory at you? And that is that the crazier the sport, the crazier the people become. I'll give you a couple of examples. Swimming is a really crazy sport. You get up at 4 a.m, go down to the pool where you go up and down a black line, I don't know, 100, 200 times, whatever, over a couple of hours. go back that night, do exactly the same thing again, do that for 15 years, and then go to a meet that lasts for 2 weeks, and hopefully, in fact, 1 week for the swimmers, and hopefully you'll do well. A lot of swimmers, and not just Grant Hackett, but a lot of swimmers don't end up well after that sport finishes, and a lot of depression in that sport. Kickboxing, boxing, that is a crazy sport. You go into the ring to allow somebody to belt a living suitcase out of you for 15 rounds. Now, I don't think that's a surprise when a lot of boxers turn out to be NQR. And I do think that there is something to do with the sport itself, but I don't see with rugby league why rugby league is particularly crazy, apart from the fact you're just running into these enormous fellows at enormous speed. But I don't see why it's so crazy that they all turn out the way they do. Every single year we talk about this.
I asked Kieran Perkins at a corporate function, any questions? I said, yes. Why do you all turn batshit crazy? And he looked at me for a few seconds. Then he said, try sticking your head in a bucket of water for 8 hours a day, champ, and then come back to me for years. And he said, unless you're a backstroker, it's like being in a bucket of water, and any demons in your head, it's the most isolating, lonely sport on the planet. And he said more than that, I could tell you to the 15-minute block what I'm doing years in advance. That's how structured their lives are. And that's not just 4 years before the Olympics. He said it's almost 8 years of that lifestyle, up at 4 a.m., head in a bucket of water for 7-8 hours a day, and then you check back in with me, champ, and see how you're going. And I said, thank you for answering the question, Mr. Perkins. But he came up later and we had a bit of a chat. He's now separated from his lovely wife. Grant Hackett did the piano man job on that Docklands apartment. They're still trying to repair that apartment. Who else have we got?
The missile
struggled enormously.
Missile, yeah.
The missile, Stephanie Wright. Like, it's probably not bad. The swimmers and afterlife, pretty tough. I'd get sick of looking at the bottom of a bloody pool for hours and hours. And really, it's their job. And this is the part, it's their job. And how much would they be paid? I think we've talked about it previously, haven't we, about being an Olympic athlete?
Especially around the medal awards as well, because they get absolutely nothing in comparison to other countries' athletes. It's ridiculous. And the fact that Paralympians now getting the same rewards for when they're winning those medals, still comparatively, it's not a lot coming from us, especially as we're a nation that's so invested in our sport. America, I think their gold medal recipients receive 4 times more than an Australian gold medal recipient, which is ridiculous.
I've got 3 kids and size 13 feet. If one of my boys has size 17 feet, I don't care if he's the next Ian Thorpe. I'm not getting up at 4 every day. I'm sorry. I'm not going to lean them towards swimming, and my daughter as well. She can win Wimbledon, but swimming is just something I don't know which parents volunteer for, but good on them for doing so, because we've produced so many superstars. But it's incredibly demanding on the parents, and you can see the effect it has on the swimmers as well. Look at Stephanie Rice, as Coutta just said. That's the latest example of someone who's beyond depressed. She's in a scary state, actually.
Do you think the Campbell parents just said to the younger sister, you've got no choice but you're swimming because your sister is? We're not driving you elsewhere. You're not playing another sport. You're swimming. So,
is she the one that recently said, I hated swimming so much I wanted to get injured so I didn't have to go to the Olympics? I mean, that's a terrible mindset.
Yeah.
For anyone to be finding themselves in that situation, that they're just pushed into that position that they want to get injured so they don't have to compete, and it's an excuse not to. And look at Simone Biles in the gymnastics as well. That's not too far off the brutality of swimming.
And Naomi Osaka copying it in tennis as well, to the fact that she doesn't want to have to deal with the media and everything anymore. There's a massive health risk being so exposed to the media and having to be so dedicated to your sport as well.
And the impact on Nick Kyrgios's love life as well. You've got to factor that in as well. It just can't keep a steady relationship going.
That's a really good analogy, Paul. Well done. Like, you brought a real serious topic and you've brought Nick Kyrgios's love life into it.
Well, he's a serious waste of talent. That's what I'll say.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought it might have been the shirt that was really getting to us there, but no.
All right, Sarah, when you got up this morning and saw that Jordan De Goey had been arrested in New York for allegedly groping a woman and attacking a woman's friend, and it happened at about 2:30 a.m. in a New York nightclub, did you think that that was going to happen, or did you just shrug your shoulders and think, oh, well, yep, these things happen?
It is one of those things, I guess. A lot of women, a lot of people have kind of, obviously it's a horrible thing that would happen to anyone, but it's something where you're like, yep, this horrible stuff's still happening. Whether it is true or not is another question. I was in Bunnings this morning for the first time and I was excited to be looking at stuff there. And I got the AFL notification app and ruined my little plant holiday that I was on. But yeah, disappointing. Obviously, I'm hoping that it's not true. But it's, yeah, I can't say I'm surprised to see these sort of allegations. We do see a lot of ones that don't necessarily get to the same level where the AFL and Collingwood are having to address it. But we do see a lot of people, a lot of athletes getting accused of this sort of stuff. And it's a very fine line to walk as well, because there's a lot of people who will accuse them of something they haven't done because of they want something in return or something vice versa. But then there's also people who won't come forward because they feel like that's not going to work for them, because these people have tried to manipulate the system and because the victims don't feel like they can actually have a chance to get someone with a higher profile. It will be interesting to see whether it's true or not, especially with his past and in terms of accusations he's had against him previously. But we'll have to see, I guess, how it turns out.
Coutta, did you have any thoughts on it?
His past, Leopard and Spots comes to mind, Sarah. Obviously, he's over in America doing a pre-season training with some specialists over there to try and get himself to be the best footballer he possibly can be, and all the talk. And he's been featured heavily in the media the last fortnight for the condition, the fitness, and the shape that he's in. But I'm not sure you can change a dickhead. So let's hope that it's not right. But if it is, then you would hope that Collingwood and also the AFL are strong on this. His mate that he's with is supposedly also in some Barney rubble. But Paul, and I drag it back to the NRL, but Matthew Lodge is an example of this. He and you look at the commentary around Matthew Lodge, and Sarah, I don't know if you know the story of Matthew Lodge, but if you don't, please have a look at it. Paul, he was meant to pay $1.6 million, got a contract with the Broncos. They said it was redemption. He was able to redeem himself. You deserve a second opportunity in life, etc., etc. I just think the AFL and the Collingwood Footy Club need to go hard on this and really make a stand.
Yeah.
Well, I do believe in sport being the power of redemption, and someone can get their life back in order to play the game. I mean, Jackson Hastings is coming back to be the halfback for the West Tigers. He was a bit loose. Jonathan Thurston, you might have heard of, initially was an absolute lunatic, sacked by the Bulldogs for 2 end-of-season trips. He was pulled to one side and has become possibly the best player ever. So there is room for redemption. But as you say, if someone's always an idiot, then perhaps some people are beyond saving, similar to people in the general population, sadly.
Yeah. It's a similar thing to, I guess, that frog and the scorpion story. Frog trying to get across and the scorpion asking for help and saying you won't sting him, and then stinging the frog and everyone just drowns. So I guess Collingwood and especially other teams in all sort of sporting codes, if someone's not willing to change who they are and if it is a part of their nature, there's nothing you can do for them. But as you mentioned before, Paul, there are athletes out there who've come around and they've come back good and they've played and they're now really talented athletes. But if this is going to start becoming a pattern with Jordan De Kock, I think Collingwood might just have to get across the river without him.
In Collingwood's best traditions, I suspect what they'll do is they'll set up a 12-person panel on family violence. They'll give them 18 months to report back, and like we know with the Harry O'Brien case, nothing will happen, and but it gets shoved under the carpet. And I think a few women should to talk to Goey and just say, listen, buddy, some things aren't tolerated, and this is one of them. Now, that's the best way to deal with an issue. You don't deal with it the way the AFL and Collingwood does.
Sarah, how does he walk back in, allegedly, for what he's done, how does he walk back into the Collingwood Football Club? Because let's forget, it's a Collingwood footy club that's got netball and a very successful AFLW program, and look them in the face.
I genuinely don't know. It's going to take a lot of courage from his side of things, and especially a lot of communication between Collingwood and their players, because as you said before, they've got a really talented AFLW side, girls that I would be terrified of if I was Jordan De Kock going back into that situation. But it's going to have to come down to communication and Collingwood's culture as a club. I know their AFLW team's really tight-knit, so they'll have to communicate with the club, and probably not as much the league, but really the club's just going to have to convey that they're there to support the girls and this is happening, and just maintain an open line of communication, so that especially if this is proven to just be all false and Jordan was just wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe someone's recognised him, or maybe it's just false news, for him to be able to come back into the Collingwood fold and not have things shaken up too much.
I see the incident happen at the nightclub called the PhD Rooftop Lounge. That's something he'll never be in danger of getting, a PhD.
Well, doesn't it show that this has allegedly all happened at 2:30 a.m. in the morning, and I think.
What's the saying, Professor? What's the saying?
Tom Hafey, I think, coined it that nothing good ever happens after midnight. So you just wonder, and he's supposed to be there training as well. So I don't know what training regime you've got if you're out allegedly on the grog at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. We'd all love to be on that training regime.
Well, Professor, it does appear that he was working on his training regime with some really quality dancing. So he might have been working on his light feet, which is good.
The Zumba.
Yeah, that's right.
Was it up there with Cameron Munster on the coffee table? That was John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever level, that was.
I'm not sure Saturday Night Fever's got any worries with these gentlemen, but Professor, what the problem is that
you could have a Dancing with the Stars. You could have a Dancing with the football stars. Reality show.
Paul, you probably raised a good point. What we will see is that if he does end his football career, he'll probably end up on Big Brother VIP or one of those sort of shows where you can go and explain what's happened in your life, and hopefully people will.
Love Island, maybe with Nick Kyrgios.
But Professor, what this does again is it gets the AFL in the media. It's a 365-day business now. There's no break. We've had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, the AFLW gets minimal airtime. But
commercially, yeah.
We've got a month between the trade period that went for 10 days that supposedly was the most successful trade period ever, but that was from a commercial perspective, from a radio. The draft is over 2 days. They've widened the role that Steve Hocking had, so they've appointed different people to that. But surprisingly, most of them are in football. I did see there was an appointment of the North Melbourne digital expert, I think, to come on board as well. So it is a 365. I suspect, Professor, and you know better, I'd love to have Dan here, that NFL is probably, and NBA is similar. And with Hutchison behind the scenes working at wherever he does, that AFL has fast become 365. And unfortunately, it doesn't quite include the AFLW. But that'll continue to generate interest in clickbait and whatever you want to call it, Professor.
So, Paul, the NRL have got the zero tolerance for the sort of behaviour that De Goey's alleged to have committed, and that's prior to any court case. What would an NRL club or the NRL be doing on notification of this sort of thing?
Well, I'm reading the allegations, and these are only allegations, is a man has complained that he was punched, kicked and struck in the face with a glass bottle. Now, I'm not commenting on whoever that was or whether that's true, but if that has any substance, we might not be seeing Jordan back in Australia for some time. What happened recently with Jack de Bellon, who was charged with horrific offences which were ultimately withdrawn, he was stood down. Now, whether this is in that category or not, I'm not sure, but that was the hardline stance that the NRL took, is that where you're charged with I'm not sure of the exact jail time, but where you're charged with an offence that carries a certain amount of jail time, you are stood down. Now, you're still paid, but you're stood down, and you're also, as far as I understand, not allowed to train with the team. So that would happen in this instance if attacking someone in the face, if that's what Jordan is ultimately charged with in the NRL, he would be stood down pending that trial.
Okay, well, I think it's a watch this space. Perhaps something not for today, Judge, but you might consider as to whether the AFL should implement its own zero tolerance policy, given that nothing else seems to be working.
Yes, it's the unfortunately we're coming up against the attractive person syndrome, Professor, where different rules apply for special people and people on $1 million contracts plus, and they're bringing the people through the gates. There seem to be different rules. So I suspect the AFL will be wary of making any blanket rules, as much as I would absolutely agree with what you guys have been saying. And by the way, Paul, that incident, I mean, this is all allegations, but a glassing, under our law, that is a prima facie imprisonment. So we're talking some pretty serious stuff. I know this is totally allegations, but they're serious matters, and obviously they ought to be taken seriously. But I'm questioning whether they will, Professor. Yeah.
Okay. Our final topic for the day: Greg Baum article in the Age following Josh Cavallo's announcement during the week. He's an Adelaide United A-League player. David, you mentioned it earlier. Would you like to perhaps make the running on it?
So this week, Josh Cavallo, Adelaide United player, came out to say that he is gay. And I think it's the first case or first Australian footballer, to do that. 6 years he's been what he describes as 6 years living a lie. And he's been featured heavily in the media. It's gone viral, would be the right term to say, and it's received the support of so many athletes. I know that's not everything, John, but when you talk about players the ilk of Abramovich and all these foreign players congratulating for his bravery, I think it just speaks volumes for the young man, and also probably also for the environment that he finds himself in at the Adelaide United, but then also by extension, I think the A-League as well. So terrific young man from everything you read and the way he presented himself this week. And I think for a sport, I think it's just, you can't speak highly enough of it, Professor. I think is probably the way to talk about it.
Professor, I think the sports world let out a collective sigh of relief when this guy came out. Finally, for God's sake, somebody has the courage. And how terrible is it that it's actually a courageous action? It should not be a remarkable action at all. It's actually a courageous action, but bloody good on him. But I think now that he's broken that voodoo taboo, whatever, hopefully it'll become mainstream and really something that people should not feel at all afraid or, think twice about revealing their sexuality. Apart from the fact, what's the hell's it got to do with playing sport? But that's another issue entirely.
If you go back to the AFLW when Erin Phelps won her award, Sarah, and a photo of her kissing her partner, I was like, what's going on here? Well, it's natural, isn't it?
Yeah. And they'd been together for years. They'd already had 2 kids together. It wasn't news to the community. But I actually read a really interesting article the other week about how much women's sport has assisted in paving the way for gay athletes to come through, because I think it was almost just assumed as a stereotype that a lot of them would be gay. And the ones that weren't gay were really supportive of their mates, and just created this really nice environment. And then introducing that into sporting clubs that were predominantly male, like any AFL club before 2017, the club just becomes such a more diverse and interesting place, because you have a group of people that can actually talk about some of these issues and convey the club's support of them as well. And as you were saying before, Judge, it's one of those things where it's you don't really want people to have to come out at all. Into, like, when you look at it as a process, it's really barbaric, and it's absolutely horrible for the person that has to come out, because you don't know how the world's going to react. They could be absolutely against you. They could love you and really get around you, and that can be really overwhelming as well. But would love to see a day when some of this stuff doesn't have to happen. Like, we're not seeing AFLW athletes coming out because it's not really it's not taboo in men's sport, but it's not normalized yet. It's still something that people aren't speaking about a lot. And the AFL is trying to make strides, I guess, by having pride matches between Sydney and St Kilda. But even like we talked about on the show this year, I had no idea it was Pride Round in the AFL until I was watching the game, and I was like, why are Sydney's jumpers different? And I was like, oh, it's because it's Pride Round. I had no idea. You'd think they do a little bit of marketing or something around it, but I didn't see much from the AFL in regards to it. So I guess we have to see a bit more from them, but also really great to see that Adelaide United has provided Josh with an environment where he feels safe enough to communicate his true self to his mates.
Well, Sarah, do you think this will make an impact on the AFL men's competition?
I would hope so. And there's been a lot of sort of from the A leagues, especially in terms of whether they become the Australian football leagues and that sort of stuff. Are we going to keep having the AFLW? Are we going to have the AFLM? There's a lot of stuff that the A leagues have been doing that's sparking a lot of conversation in terms of what other sporting leagues are doing. A leagues is quite a pivotal, especially in Australia, thing to happen, because it wasn't them, it was them uniting the men's and women's competition to fall under one banner. So I think the AFL has a lot on its to-do list. How it goes in approaching it and when it actually happens will be really interesting to see, hopefully while we're all alive to actually see it.
Paul, the NRL, probably the most famous one would be Mark Roberts, wouldn't it? Is it Mark?
Ian Roberts.
Ian Roberts would it be? Ian Roberts?
Yep.
Yeah. But he came out after he finished playing, though, didn't he?
Well, he was. There was a famous incident when poor old Gary Jack decided, in his non-wisdom, to call him, I think, a fairy or some other word, and received 8 punches to the face. You wouldn't see that better quality landed punches in a heavyweight boxing fight. And he said in his book, Ian Roberts, that was all those pent-up years of frustration came out. Obviously, didn't condone what he did, but he was the first that came out as openly gay. Yeah, and there hasn't been too many others, actually, surprisingly.
Yeah, and Professor was at the NFL this year, first one in the NFL.
Massive.
Yeah.
And he was, I think he's the first player to come out while still playing in the NFL. So he's the first active NFL player to come out, but I think he was maybe the 16th or 17th NFL player to come out as gay. It's just those first 15, 16 players had never been comfortable enough to come out while they were still playing. And that was another thing. When Carl Nassib did come out, it sparked a bit of conversation in Australia, which was, why does it seem like the AFL is the only sport that seems like there's no gay male footballers? Is it something that's happening in grassroots where there's young gay men who don't feel supported in the environment and are dropping out? Is it that they don't feel supported and they've still come through and don't want to come out now they've reached that level and they're afraid of being criticised? Either way, it's not a good look. You want to be able to support those athletes coming through for the same way that the AFLW was established, which was to give young women the ability to play sport, because most of them are stopping playing sport when they're 14, 15. You want to give everyone the opportunity to have a crack at doing a sport that they love. If everyone wants to kick a footy, everyone should be able to have a kick at the footy at any sort of level. Even if you can't kick a football, go out and try, I guess, which is what I did. But yeah, hopefully something new coming along soon with the AFL can actually help spark those conversations and help provide an environment where everyone can play sport and have equitable sport for all, which is the overall goal of why Australia is so passionate about sport, because we want to be able to have that opportunity for everyone in our country.
Well said, Sarah. Professor, can I suggest that my idea is get rid of themed rounds? We've got the Pride round, and yet no AFL footballer feels comfortable enough to come out and openly declare that he's gay. We've got the Indigenous round. Eddie Betts says that he doesn't feel safe playing in his own football club because of the racist culture which is around the AFL. And the problem is with a themed round is it looks like something's being done. Well, nothing's been done except that the AFL makes a bucket load of money out of the merchandise and jumpers and the so-called feel-good factor that they get from it. I've said the same about the Anzac round. There's never been a connection between the Anzacs and Australian rules football. And I just think all it is a money-making episode and a feel-good episode for the league. And I'd actually rather that they got rid of it and pay attention to people like this wonderful young man. And that's where you get change.
Yeah, Judge, question for you. Why is it, and this is how I see it, why is it that gay men in elite teams, it's not normalised for them to actually come out, right? The feeling is that they can't.
Yes.
I don't get the same feeling with women's teams. Like if like, let's take Erin Phillips as an example, right? Well, yes, she's got a female partner. Yep, that's normal. No worries. Play on, get on with it. Nobody reels in horror and just said, oh, okay. And that's not just that example. It's every example.
Casey Delacroix.
Yet we go onto the men's side of things and it's treated totally, it's not normalised. It doesn't feel like it will ever be normalised. Of course, we all hope it does and is. Surely there's going to be more work done.
I think Sarah would have a viewpoint as well, but my overall viewpoint is that women do life differently from men. And it is no surprise that women do sport differently from men. And it's one of the greatest things I think about the AFLW is we're going to see a cultural change in that sport in a whole lot of areas. And I think misogyny, violence to women, acceptance of same-sex relationships, well, that's three examples off the top of my head, which I think will be improved because of women coming into the game. Sarah?
Oh, definitely. And that's sort of what I touched on a bit before, is that especially when the AFLW was established, some of these players were already at a mature age, had been playing footy at a VFLW level. But they had, as Erin Phillips did, she had a family. She'd been married for a few years. She was like very supported by her family. So she wasn't too concerned about it. I would be actually interested to see if there are any gay women's footballers who are apprehensive about joining the league and how they might have thought that process would look like. But the fact that there was so many of them, it just provided a safer environment. And there was evidence from all AFLW clubs or football clubs that they were very supportive of these girls coming through. So I think the clubs are ready to be supportive to their men's footballers. It's just really when it actually happens, what the next step is. And we don't see a lot of gay male athletes, like even British diver Tom Daly. He's a gold medalist. He's gay, and there was a lot of speculation about him and his partner. And the other thing that the media builds their own narratives around him. So I'll talk about his gold medal, but then a different media that maybe wants to get more of that clickbait sort of stuff will start talking about his really intimate personal details how is he having kids? Was there a surrogate? Was it this? Was it that? And he had so many people asking these really personal questions of him that I'm sure everyone would, all athletes would get at some point about one thing or another. But it doesn't provide a very safe environment if you're going to come out and think that the only questions I'm going to get asked aren't going to be about my game. They're going to be about my sexuality and they're going to be about my personal life. I wouldn't want that. If I was a professional athlete and I'm really dedicated to my sport, I want people to ask me, like, how great was that goal you kicked out there? How amazing was that dive? Anything in regards to that. But I guess the media and different media publications will approach it differently. We'll just have to, I guess, see how they go and maybe try and provide a bit more of a supportive environment and see where the narrative takes them.
Okay, well, it's an excellent discussion there, and certainly one that's thought-provoking. Some good points there too, Sarah. Thanks for sharing that with us. The Gelding's not here today, so he's left me with his tips. I don't think Pia would be interested in any of these, John, because they're all very short-priced. What do you like? Is Mornington race? No, there's no 17 to 1s there. Mornington race 4, horse 7, bankroll. So there's an omen bet for you, Mr. Dalligan. Bankroll in race 4, race 7, horse 7. Toys on Fire. You might have had some of that too, Paul.
What was that one?
Toys on Fire.
For the kids, I hope they don't set fire to them. So,
Professor, is there any Saturday night fever-themed horses? Because Paul could maybe take those as an omen bet, given his look that he's rocking today.
Well, Halloween omens would be nice. So anything with bats in it or something like that.
Well, he's scaring me, so yeah.
All right. And
I've got to find an outfit. I'm taking the
8,
kids trick-or-treating tonight. So maybe the shirt will do.
Race 8, horse 2, Imperial Lad. They're the morning tips. Then he's got 4 for Mortlake. Race 1, horse 2, Launchpad. Maybe this afternoon's Launchpad for you, Paul. Race 2, horse 9, Flying Artist. Race 3, horse 8, Free Market. Race 6, horse 4, See What You Think. Is long-term cup, Melbourne Cup selection incentivised. So there we have it. Thanks very much to the panel, and we'll look forward to talking with you all again next Sunday. Until then,